Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest webinar from thebusinessdesk.com. I'm Alex Turner, I'm our Joint Managing Director. It's great to have so many of you with us on a Friday lunchtime for this webinar on Be Prepared for When the World Unpauses. I think we're a month into our current reality, and I think a lot of businesses have dealt with that, initial shock and the response to those operational challenges and the issues that were very big and loomed large in front of their faces in that second half of March, and have now, on the whole, been able to settle down into some kind of stable operating position, but with lots of concerns and issues that they're dealing with on a daily basis. But hopefully in the next 40 minutes or so, we will look very much at that question of what's next. For those businesses who aren't in survival mode, how do they deal with some of the issues that will arise in the months ahead? How do they respond to the operational changes that will come, the cultural changes that we will see? How do they ensure that their business stays in a robust position? And also for those businesses that are able to do well in the current environment, how do they position themselves to take advantage of the disruption, the opportunities that may bring over the months ahead? I'm joined by three people who'll be familiar to many of you, who'll bring different perspectives to this discussion. So we have Paul Corcoran, the Chief Executive of Agent Marketing and the Deputy Chair of Liverpool Local Enterprise Partnership. Joy Kingsley, the Senior Partner of JMW Solicitors, and Victoria Price, Partner with EY, who's been the lead on the Entrepreneur of the Year programme in the North for the last few years. So welcome all. If you could just start off by giving a brief introduction to yourself, and then to just say what gives you most cause for optimism at the moment. And if I could start with you, Paul.
Thanks, Alex. My name is Paul Corcoran. I'm the CEO of Agent, which is a full-service brand and communications agency based in Liverpool, but working across the UK. We also run Agent Academy, which is a learning programme, learning training organisation, which supports young people into the creative and digital sectors. And like you said, I'm the Vice Chair of Liverpool City Region Local Enterprise Partnership. What gives me optimism has been the resilience of businesses, and the positivity that is coming out of businesses, and now the green shoots that are coming through in terms of the new ideas that are coming through, the phone calls that are coming through from businesses looking to collaborate. And the positivity that's coming through from entrepreneurs and existing entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in the making who've got new ideas that they want to see into fruition post this crisis. So yeah, some good stuff coming through.
Great. Joy?
Yes, hi, I'm Joy Kingsley, Senior Partner at JMW Solicitors in Manchester and London, mainly Manchester. We have 540 staff. I was previously managing partner at another large law firm, and I also hold 2 or 3 non-execs. I should say 3 really, I should know how many there are. Yes, what gives me a feeling of positivity going forward, and I think many of us will say this, is the way that our staff and partners did pull together very early doors. We weren't equipped to be, in all cases, to be sent home in almost our entirety, even though a number of people do work from home regularly. And within a very short time, and obviously when people couldn't get hold of laptops and other essential items, we managed to get pretty well all of our staff that would be able to work from home equipped to do so. And obviously our IT department very important in that, but many other people were very important and are continuing to be. And I think also We were lucky in that we had a very good relationship with our bank, and we very early doors did all sorts of things that gave us security going forward so that we could keep running the business without worrying. Of course, we are all worried about what the future looks like in terms of return to work in any way, and in terms of what we'll find when we get here, what the recession will look like, how deep that will be. But I think that we all have a belief that we will come through this, and I know there are businesses that won't, but we here do believe that we will. But what it will look like, the difficulty is a bit like fighting fog, you know, because we just don't know what everything's going to look like, and we're all listening to the news daily and hourly, and hoping that some sort of normality will come. It certainly won't be normal as we know it, possibly ever again.
Indeed. Victoria.
Hi, so I'm Victoria Price. I lead our private client service team in the UK at EY, based out of the Manchester office. So all of my clients are either high net worth individuals or entrepreneurial businesses that are based in the Northwest. As you'd imagine, working in tax, I've been incredibly busy over the last few weeks, as have the rest of my team, really supporting clients with some of those short-term needs in terms of accessing pots of finance and deferring taxes and working with the authorities to help from a liquidity perspective. If I think about what gives me the sort of most confidence and the thing that I think could be a real positive is the uptake of technology use has really accelerated over this period. So if we think about how we were working just 4 weeks ago as compared to today, people that probably never even knew what Teams was, didn't really engage with some existing technology out there. It's just been transformational, and I would like to think that what we will see are more emerging technologies as we have to come to terms with not only a new way of working, but also in the medical space, for example, new technologies that will help doctors and the healthcare sector deal with the fact that they need to be able to make diagnosis and support patients where human to human contact is not the order of the day. So I think that is quite an exciting thing that we might see come out of the current situation.
Indeed, and for me, I think one of the real positives has been, we often use the phrase, business community. I think just like in the wider community, you really get to understand how strong that is when times are tough. And I think, I've seen an awful lot of examples of business leaders working together in a very collaborative way to help each other out and to help people get through the challenges that everybody faced together, and that idea that we're all facing similar set of circumstances. I think there's been a real willingness to share advice and time and expertise with each other, which has been a real positive for the business community. Just before we launch fully into the discussion, just to flag up the Q&A option. So if people have questions as we go, you'll see the question and answer button. So do type away, and I will look to weave those in as we go along through our discussion. Just to start off on a kind of short-term view, and if we could start with you, Victoria, what are the actions that business owners and managers should be looking at now with the kind of the next 6 months in mind?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen over the last few weeks and will continue over the next couple is definitely the steadying of the ship and doing the sensible things that aren't going to cause any damage for the longer term. I think at this point, businesses are starting to think about, what will the shape of the economy mean for them, and the new way of working. What are the positives that they can take from that? And so I think that already businesses are starting to see some of the efficiencies that can be driven through this new way of working. So reductions in travel costs, being able to meet the green agenda a bit more for businesses, which we know are really important to people in the UK, but also looking at how can they adapt and step into new areas of providing services or products that they might not have seen an opportunity to do previously. So one of the things I love the most about my role is working with entrepreneurial clients, and they just have no shortage of good ideas, and I guess the innovative things that they've been talking about doing is, it's actually quite exciting, and I think we will see a flurry of people seeing this as a real opportunity, and I guess that is always the challenge if you've got a very large existing business. How do you adapt and change what you've already got? But for some, it will I think create real opportunity to do new and exciting things. So yeah, I think that it's for the medium term, it's what can we take from the situation, what have we learned that we should stick with, and we should continue to work in some more efficient and modern ways potentially. I think we're going to see some businesses seize opportunities with asset prices being low in certain areas. So there will be those who are brave enough and have got an appetite to do so, who will definitely be seeing it as an opportunity to acquire other businesses or invest in things, which again will change the landscape when we come out of this, I think.
And Joy, from your perspective, where does that balance lie between people focused very much on the short term with the people who are looking at opportunity and what assets might be available and where the medium term future might sit?
I think in certainly law firms and professional services firms, it's quite a lot about people. The people are the assets, the people have the clients, and certainly something that we've been able to do is still be brave about recruitment. There's been a lot in professional service firms where people who have already given their notice in one job are then having job offers which they've accepted and are about to start withdrawn, which it is legally possible to do, paying often not much of a notice period. We've not done that at all. Anybody we committed to, we've taken into the business, but we're now looking at business opportunities, and we've got a team of 17 joining us where the negotiation has been largely while locked down. And we also have other partners in both Manchester and London that we've still spoken to. A lot of firms are saying, no, we're not going to recruit at all until after we come back and we see what everything looks like, etc. But we've taken the contrary view, and we're not piling in all over the place, but we're certainly carrying on building for the future, which is something that we would have done in any event. There are going to be less transactions. That's what's largely fallen away. A lot of banks are shut for business, but we're looking at still carrying on. We haven't made we haven't furloughed our marketing team, and everybody, all the partners in both offices are still looking at opportunities that they would have looked at before, and being aware that there are still many clients out there, and we need to grow our client base to make up for the fact that some clients will be doing less.
Yeah, I think Joy makes a really good point there, actually. So one of the things that we saw after the last recession and the medium term picture around talent is that any kind of economic downturn does create a surplus of talent, and it often means that, for those people who are prepared to continue investing in top talent, it can create an opportunity for them to bring people into the business that otherwise in different circumstances would be quite wedded to where they'd been previously.
Yeah, and you touched on the shape of the economy that we will kind of re-emerge into. I mean, Paul, particularly with your Liverpool hat on, there's a lot of nervousness in the city about exactly how it will look when restrictions are lifted, and how resilient businesses are at the moment. What's your sense of, particularly with the visitor economy and those businesses that rely on, all the great things that we think of when we think of Liverpool?
Yeah, I think
Okay, so the visitor economy obviously has been, hugely affected by the crisis that we find ourselves going through. And yet there's been lots of government initiatives and support that's been provided. I think we're going to have to put our thinking hats on and think in different ways. I think we need to think about how people are going to behave post-crisis. How people will be looking at the visitor economy. Will people be going to theatres? How will people be spending their free time? How will people be travelling around the UK? Will they be going abroad? Probably less so. And how do we make sure that we're more attractive than ever? I think we also need to make sure that what we're doing is investing in our place brand. So making ourselves more real, right and relevant than ever before, and more attractive than ever before, and working collectively to do that. We've got the LEP's really got a really strong visitor economy board, which is led by Laura Pye, and we've got some amazing people who are providing real insight and intelligence from across the board, whether that be from the big attractions, the cruise liner, some of those smaller restaurants, businesses, bars, etc. And it is about us collaborating and listening to those people and making sure that what we're doing is we're coming together with a package and a proposition that works for everyone. And I think now more than ever, it is about making sure that we are listening and we are doing what we can to support each other. I think you're right in what you were saying before about community. The business community really has galvanized, and that's not just been in terms of, the city regions, but across the north, the MP11 working really closely together, Northwest Business Leadership Team, which I sit on, working closely together, and then all the various different organisations and kind of sector organisations sharing information, sharing tips, and just generally being there for each other to make sure that we all come out of this at the other end.
Yeah, I think that point about behavioural change is really interesting. Victoria, in terms of your entrepreneurial clients, how do they begin to plan for the unknown behavioural changes, not knowing how much we'll be travelling over the next 12 months and how our appetite for things like travel, or how our appetite for risk might have changed, and how do you start to build that into the planning?
I think it's really interesting because on the one hand, there is going to be a framework in place which to a large extent dictates how some of those things unravel over the coming months. And at the moment, we don't have a clear plan on what that's going to look like. And the other thing is the Northwest is home to some fantastic businesses, and those businesses are global. So it's not just dealing with the unwind of restrictions in the UK, it's also looking at that global platform and who's further ahead or behind of where we are. The other really interesting bit is how's this going to impact consumer psychology, and how's it going to impact the way that businesses behave and the role that businesses play from a societal perspective moving forward. So if we just look at that consumer psychology point for a minute, I mean, we only have to look at how much everybody hoarded toilet roll to see that there was some really immediate changes and reactions to the way that people behaved, and we would expect that to slow down and kind of come back to some sort of normality. But will we be in a situation where we are always concerned about not being able to get some basic essentials? Will we see a shift for consumers being much less materialistic after 3 months of not really bothering too much about buying new clothes because they're not going anywhere? Will there be an increase in people really valuing experiences above the material things that they might have? Then from a business perspective, I think there'll be real winners and losers in terms of, to Paul's point, those businesses that really shine as the ones that came together and supported, not only other businesses, but also society more generally. So we had some great stories from our region of businesses that have started producing life-saving equipment, who are producing meals for the homeless, and the list list in terms of some of the positives we've seen has been fantastic, and I've been really proud to see lots of my clients involved in that. On the more negative side, businesses that are seeking very large government bailouts and, then at the same time not doing the right thing by their people and not doing the right thing for their communities, will probably face the wrath of public opinion in a way, and we'll see a viewed negatively.
I think it's a really interesting point that Victoria's made about brands and how brands have, and companies and leaders have behaved in this crisis. We all have a huge responsibility to do what's best for our teams, because we all go to work to, put food on the table and roofs above our heads, and we all have a real responsibility as business leaders and business owners to make sure that we continue that duty of care for our teams. And I think more than ever before, we're going to see real changes in employee behaviour and in relation to the companies and brands that they want to work for. The ones who really did do the right thing by their customers, by their communities, the ones who stepped up and kept good, solid communication, who took pay cuts when pay cuts needed to be taken, who went out there and did the right thing. And for me, that is they're the kind of companies I would want to work with. They're the kind of companies I would want to work for. The ones that have, reneged on their CSR statement, shall we say, who went for the awards and won many awards for their wonderful social impact. For me, actions speak louder than words, and we really are seeing the ones who are doing what they said they would do.
And Joy, how do you see that playing out? Do you see customers and consumers kind of maintain that position, being much more interested in a company's values and how they live those values? I mean, it seems to be a trend that was underway anyway and gathering pace. Is that going to be embedded, or might it be a short-lived thing and we will all return to normal after a while?
I think inevitably there will be change as a result of all of this. We've all lived through and are all living through something that we've never lived through in working life ever, and that there will be change, and clients, customers, I think will be more concerned, hopefully, about each other and about what they might do for the common good. And we are seeing a lot more of that coming through. But I do have a fear that if by next year things seem much more normal, that people will have forgotten the national health by then. I mean, I daren't even say that in my own area where I went out to clap last night at 8 o'clock, there are already a lot less people doing that. They've got a bit bored of it. Now, it doesn't really mean anything. It's not doing good by doing that, but it just makes me think that when normality returns, the behaviours that were there before, with some modifications, will carry on.
I think it's the point on normal, I think, is really interesting, isn't it? So we did a study looking at the different generations, so millennials and kind of baby boomers and so on and so forth. By 2030, we will have 2.7 billion people who haven't been alive, in a pre-COVID world, and their assumptions about what makes us, vulnerable and the kind of impact that a global health crisis can have, it won't be based on the majority of their life having been lived pre-COVID and then having to deal with something that feels totally abnormal. Their whole point of reference will be a world where we've had to deal with this, and who knows what will come in the future. And so it would be really interesting as that generation starts going to college and starts sort of going into business, what will that mean? And I think things that we will have learned lessons from, are how robust are people's businesses, their supply chains. You know, anybody at the moment that's sat there, for example, very reliant on, you know, heaven forbid, but goods from Italy, you know, they're not going to have been able to get anything for a really long period of time. So looking at the way you operate your business globally, the number of suppliers you're working with, the number of customers, the different countries that you're working with. And I think we might see businesses look to use both technology and also diversification in the medium to long term to become much more resilient. So we could see onshore manufacturing to, you know, hedge against that. We could see 3D printing and other types of manufacturing, you know, which would be able to withstand some of these issues much more easily. And that could be the new norm. And future generations might look back and think, how did you ever put yourself in a position where there was so much risk in the supply chain?
Yeah. And you know, one of the interesting things around supply chains is, you know, people have said to me that, you know, they benefited from Brexit planning because they'd considered a lot of these issues. And as we've touched on international trade, you know, what's our view on Brexit in terms of, you know, is it something that's still going to be happening this year, or do we expect it to be kicked down the path a little bit longer? Paul, do you want to start us off?
I think, I mean, when we were going through the Brexit planning process at the LEP, we had a Brexit resilience fund put together for dealing with some of the challenges that we thought were going to come down the line in relation to supply chain issues, new legislation and whatnot, and working with organisations like the RHA to look at what the ramifications were going to be of the new procedures and processes that we would have to go through. I think some of the learning that we took and we received at that time is being used really to help us to start to lobby government in terms of helping us in the current situation. It's not going to go away. It'll be interesting to see how high on the agenda it's going to be going forward, really.
Yeah. Joy, what's your expectation of how Brexit will be dealt with over the next few months? Is it something that businesses need to be fully on top of, or can they put it on the back burner for a little bit? Oh, you're just on mute at the moment, Joy.
Okay, back again. Yeah, it appears that for the government, the current crisis is all consuming, and there seems to be little discussion about Brexit. We have to remind ourselves sometimes that we have actually left, as it were, because last night we were looking at a position on VAT, and we had to remember that we were no longer in the EU, and so obviously in general terms it is still affecting our lives, but I think it has inevitably taken a back seat for the moment in many businesses. But I say that you know, we don't ourselves do a large amount of international work or EU work or whatever, and it may be different in other people's businesses where they are still dealing with problems created by what has happened and what is going to happen. But for us, certainly, our prime concern at the moment is trying to keep people in their jobs and finding ways of doing that. And building to certain types of work that we know will come back at a point which might be a month after we are able to return to work, because it's not about us in our business returning to work, it's about everybody around us in all their businesses returning to work and us being able to deal in the new normal, as it were.
And in terms of the new normal, one of the things that is starting to get talked about, Victoria, is the expectation of future tax rises and that they will need to be put in place. And, you know, the Chancellor's hinted at that several times already. What's your sense of how the government will seek to recoup some of the money they need to? And how do businesses start to factor that in?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and you know, what do you expect? It's difficult to expect anything other than kind of austerity times 10, isn't it? So I think, you know, what we've seen from Rishi Sunak is a really good package that is trying to get cash into the hands of both individuals but also business as quickly as possible. I think the tax system actually and the deferrals and time to pay arrangements that you've brought in, as well as kind of rate cuts and so on, has been a significant part of that, because I think there's been some challenges with the government lending scheme. But notwithstanding that, however they're getting cash out to business, you know, in the medium term, that becomes irrelevant, because you need to start looking at that longer term picture of, it's great that there were things that allowed business to survive and, you know, individuals to continue to be able to meet their needs, but all of that does come at a cost, and at the moment what we're seeing is government borrowing increase, and measures will need to be brought in to manage that, and it's really difficult, isn't it? So who'd want that job at the moment? Because if you think about the you know, the way that the Treasury will manage that, is they look at both the spending side, so what is the package of things that they'll bring in to, you know, whether it's investment into schools, the police, or other services. They look at what they pass down to local councils for them to spend on a kind of, you know, that's part of the rebalancing, really important. And then the flip side of the equation is, what are they going to do to increase taxes? And at the moment, we you know, we're expecting to see investment from the Conservative Party in lots of those areas, and who'd want to switch off the tap on spending on the NHS at the moment, for example, given, you know, how much we've got them all to thank for. So it's going to be a really challenging balancing act, and I think what Rishi Sunak will be looking to do is to increase taxes in areas where you know, it's more related to things that aren't going to stifle businesses' ability to get themselves back on their feet, at the same time as they're probably pushing out over a longer time period the rate at which they expect to get back into a lower debt position. So you know, that's a very long way of saying I don't think there's an easy answer. I think it's inevitable that tax raises will happen, but probably too early at this point to say where we will see them.
Sure. And if I'll just jump onto some of the questions we've had coming through. There's one for you, Paul, from Jody, and he asks, how can businesses balance the desire to help and do the correct things versus making hay from the current situation?
For me, it's about the truth is always the truth, you know, and a brand should always be authentic. I think there's one thing, doing the right thing is always the right way. And I think also as well, but also, you know, utilising the opportunity to do the right thing. You know, this is a real opportunity for businesses to really lead on and demonstrate their values by their behaviours. So it's about getting the balance. But yeah, I mean, lots of businesses have come out and done some amazing things, and I think they should continue to do that and communicate the stuff that they're doing so well.
We've had, I think, 3 questions on the theme of offices and how we think that the future will look in terms of how people work. Do we need the same size of offices that we've been used to? Joy, what's your thought on how you know, perhaps your business might change or not change in that respect? And if you just want to unmute that.
There we are, off again. Yeah, I was on a call yesterday with 43 managing partners of professional services businesses, and they were very much discussing that they intend to take much smaller premises going forward, and that they will have, because it's worked so well, many people working from home much more of the norm. I think people agree that they don't want to lose teams working together, not just in talking to each other like this, but talking to each other and sparking off each other, but there'll be a lot more home working. Obviously, a lot of people, however, are tied into leases for some years to come. And I don't think in necessarily many cases, landlords are proving to be a pushover in respect of people trying even to get a pause on the payment of their business leases. We have always been a firm that very much has grown by everybody working together, going out together, seeing lots of different people around Manchester and bringing in their work in that way. So I'm sure we've got lessons to learn, but we won't be going from having accommodation where everybody can come in and use a desk to something that's very, very much smaller than that, where everybody works from home, because we've accepted, and we already had accepted, that people can do the work that they've got to do, whether it's at home, whether it's with a client, whether it's in the office. But there is a whole other piece there to do with bringing in the work, which can't be done so easily, and supervision is slightly more difficult without being able to be with your colleagues, be with your clients, etc. Obviously, when you're with the client, you're not in the office, but we won't be going to a situation where people aren't welcome in the office.
I think it's really interesting, the point about offices, because it's less about the office and more about what happens in the office and what the opportunities an office and a space brings to the team and the work being created. Certainly for us, we're a team of 24, and we're all still busy working away. None of my team have been furloughed, and we collaborate an awful lot. And we sit around and we have workshops and creative sessions and planning meetings and whatnot. But it's the stuff that you just can't do when you're not together. It's the walking past someone's desk and seeing something on their screen. It's the overhearing somebody just mentioning someone. It's someone coming into the office that you've been meaning to speak to. It's that kind of stuff. It's the birthdays when you gather around and sing happy birthday to your team member, or you bring in breakfast and you all have, a chat over a breakfast. That might not be about work, but it's certainly about investing in culture. I think what's going to be interesting is about how we utilize our spaces moving forward, and how we actually start to become more flexible about what we do in those spaces, the kinds of breakout areas that we want to have, the opportunities that we have. We have an open door policy for our clients, so our clients can come and work in our space whenever they want. And what that does is it breaks down barriers and creates better relationships, and there will be more of that. But how do we support those smaller businesses in our supply chain that can't afford to have offices anymore? How do we give up space for them that might be that we're not using because someone might be working from home on a Monday or a Tuesday now? And how do we become more flexible and more attractive to people who want to come and work in our space? How do we ask our team members what they want from their spaces? What can we be doing? Can we, dare I say, be looking at childcare provision, health, mental health spaces? How do we think much more innovatively about what our spaces can do? Because the only thing that's going to get us through this is our people. And actually, we need to make sure that our people are being well looked after. And so therefore, our spaces should be there to serve them and their needs, which in turn will serve the businesses moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, Victoria, a lot of the large professional services firms like EY have had that mindset of supporting customers and clients and being collaborative about use of space and about how teams work in a different way these days in terms of breakout spaces, and there's been an awful lot of change over the last few years. Do you see that accelerating in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I really hope it does. So, you know, when I look at our UK team, we've got around 14,000 people in the UK, and we encourage flexible working. And in fact, I joined the firm in 2005, and one of the things that really stood out to me 50 flexible working and working from home, even, you know, back 15 years ago, which was really different to what I saw in some other professional businesses. And we've just moved forward with that. So lots of you will know that about a year and a half ago, we opened up the new office in St. Peter's Square in Manchester. We've got a really lovely office on Chapel Street in Liverpool. And the intention with those offices is that we are under capacity single person coming into the office, and that's for a few reasons. First of all, we think it's great for our people if they can work anywhere that they want, anytime that they want, and there's huge personal benefits to that, but it also helps with congestion in the city and, you know, pollution and so on, and working on that basis allows us to do some really positive things to share space, and, you know, tech businesses, for example, to come in and use the space there to give it for meetings and, you know, other really good things that we think have a greater impact, and it costs us very little to do it. But do you know what, we're most of us are all accountants and we like routine, and, you know, when I look across my team, even though lots of those provisions have always been there, and I couldn't manage my life without kind of taking advantage of being at home sometimes, lots of our people just are wedded to the desk, and they really liked being there. So one of the things that I think will really change is that people will have kind of proven to themselves that they can work in different and more flexible ways. And I would hope that we would see people really embracing that moving forward. It's really interesting because we're a people business, and, you know, why do we have such good and long-lasting relationships with clients? Well, yeah, we're pretty good at what we do, and you know, I love talking about tax, but ultimately it's down to those relationships that you build. And a lot of what Paul said really resonated, because it's about having those opportunities to build relationships. And if you're not doing that face to face, then we're all in a brave new world of, you know, how do you set about making meaningful contact with clients and so on, if you're not always going to be doing it in person, and if you're not going to be for the foreseeable taking them out for dinner or so on. So I think we've all got to adapt, but I think this is one thing that could be a massive positive.
Can I just say a very quick thing to add into Victoria's around why the workplace is so important? You know, is the mental health, you know, benefits that come with having somewhere to go. I mean, I love working from home. I expect this space where I can work from, but I love going to work. I love going into work. I love being around people. I love listening to all the different conversations. I love being able to collaborate with people. I love to be in a different space. And I think, you know, there will always be a place for that. And I certainly think that what I hope comes out of this is that employers really do step up to the plate in relation to doing what they can do to really enhance people's mental health. I think that we've seen so many good examples over the years, but I think that we can all do a whole lot more. And it's not about us having to dig deep and find lots and lots of money. It could be as simple as making sure that we're all, you know, mentally health awareness trained, that we're all spotting looking out for symptoms in others, that we're just there for people. And I think that I hope that our workplaces of the future and the workplace that we go back to will be safer and happier places as a result of us all being that bit kinder to the people that we work with.
Yeah, great. Well, Paul's inadvertently managed to answer the question I was going to ask everybody, the final thing. So I will ask the question to Joy and Victoria about what's the one thing that you would like to come out of the current reality and like to see, you know, maintained over the long run. Joy.
Well, I was just going to say I agree with Paul and what he's just said about the recognition and kindness and realising what people's problems were, because of course it's easy to see why a number of people would very much like working from home and being with their family at a time that we all feel unsure about things. but we were amazed by the number of people that worked for us that didn't want to be at home, and really have given us problems of trying to find a way of keeping, people that live on their own, that literally aren't seeing anybody else, and they might only have perhaps a cat or a dog for company, and they in some cases, one or two, we did furlough 95 people. You can't keep 6 receptionists employed when there's no reception open, and so we have got a number of staff furloughed, and again, not that in some cases was very positively received by staff who had other obligations, maybe teaching obligations of children at home, but not everybody did, and we had to think of a number of ways of making sure that those people were very regularly contacted, not just about work, which is what the teams were doing, but also the social things that so many people have done that seem a bit hackneyed, doing quizzes and nights and things like that, but those are very important to the people that live alone, and hopefully some of that will transfer over, and some of the policies that we have had will enable us to add to the things that we already do.
And Victoria, for the final word.
I think what I'd like to see is a rebuilding of trust. So if I reflect on what we've seen over, let's say, the last 5 years, my children talk as if it's completely normal about things like fake news, and they talk about the corporates who have been really high profile for doing things that they disagree with, whether it's in the supply chain or whether it's the way that they've behaved to people in the business. And I think one of the great things about the way that the nation has come together and has come behind the NHS and other kind of key workers, but also the way we've already commented on that companies have responded. There's a great opportunity for us as a society to rebuild the trust, and also in the company in the region. From our very personal perspective at EY, and recognise that everybody is very different depending on which sector you are. As a partner group, we have made a commitment to take all 14,000 of our employees through this crisis, and to come out the other end whole. So we won't be furloughing anybody or kind of making any reduced hours or redundancies, and the impact that that's had on our teams, for us to be able to come our health piece, and really checking in on a one-on-one basis and trying to empathise and understand the issues that people are facing, I hope will really help our people have trust that our priority at this time is doing the right thing for them. So it would be great if we could leave this all feeling much more positive and confident about people doing the right thing.
That's great, and a good note to end on, I think. So if I could just finish with some thank yous. So thank you to Victoria, Joy and Paul for your time and insight this lunchtime. Thank you to everybody who's been sat listening. I hope you've found it interesting, giving you plenty of things to think about. And just to flag up, we are doing plenty of webinars over the next few weeks on all sorts of themes. So do keep your eye on the business desk to see what we have coming up, and hope that you're able to tune in again soon. Okay. Have a good afternoon, everybody.